Posterior ethmoidal canal transmits all of the following except the options are posterior ethmoid artery, posterior ethmoidal nerve, posterior ethmoidal vein, none of the above. Now this is a kind of advanced question actually, and before we get into the depth of this question, we should try to understand the relation of the ethmoid bone with the orbit, right? So I'll just try to make a rough figure that will help you to understand this. So suppose I'll just give you the illustration. This is the orbit, okay, and this is a try to understand it as a 3D, okay. So here you can see this particular portion here. This particular portion is the lesser wing of the sphenoid, and here you will be seeing a foramina that is known as basically the sphero this thing, the fissure, the superior orbital fissure, not the foramina here. And here this is the lesser wing of sphenoid, right? Now here if you see at this particular point, this yellowish, I'll just call this point as the optic canal, as the optic canal, okay. Now this bone, the outer bone, is the frontal bone. So basically you can say the roof of your orbit is basically formed by frontal bone, lesser wing of sphenoid, and that contains the optic canal and superior orbital fissure, right? So this is the roof. You have to remember the relations actually. So I'll just write frontal bone, which we have seen, lesser wing of sphenoid, and yes, there will be two fissures kind of thing, optic canal or superior orbital fissure. Now we'll see the medial aspect, the medial wall, okay. Now to understand the medial wall, I'll just again try to draw it schematically. So first of all, you'll have the body of the sphenoid bone, okay. After that, there will be another bone, that is the ethmoid bone. Ethmoid bone. After ethmoid, there will be lacrimal bone. There will be lacrimal bone, and after that, there will be maxilla. Okay. After the lacrimal bone, the outer side is made up of maxilla. Now this is the medial portion. Okay, because this is on the medial side. This is the lateral portion. Now coming to the lateral portion of the bone, this particular orbit is formed by the greater wing of sphenoid. This portion is generally formed by greater wing of sphenoid, and the lateral wall here is formed by the outer one, the outer portion, this whole portion is formed by zygomatic bone. Okay, so this is the lateral portion. Now this is going to be the floor. This complete triangle is going to be the floor. So this floor is formed by maxilla. Okay, so the maxilla was forming till here, the outer portion was the maxilla, and most of the portion here also is going to be your maxilla. So maxilla will be forming what? The medial wall as well as the floor of the orbit, right? And here you will be having the palatine process. Okay, the palatine bone, actually not the process, the palatine bone also, that will be forming the floor of this particular bone. Here also you can see the zygomatic bone forms the lateral wall, as well as the little contribution is there in the floor of the orbit. So this is the relation here. Okay, now if you see here, you will be finding that the ethmoid bone is present in the medial wall, right? And this medial wall will be having two canals here. Okay, this ethmoid bone in the medial wall will be having two canals there. One will be the anterior. Basically this is the foramina actually. So one will be the anterior and another will be the posterior. So on the anterior aspect, this will be the anterior and another will be the posterior. Now the thing to remember here is that both the anterior as well as the posterior ethmoidal canal are going to traverse the vessels, whether it is artery or it is vein, of the same name. Posterior ethmoidal artery will be traversing into the posterior ethmoidal canal. Anterior ethmoidal artery will be traversing into the anterior ethmoidal canal. Okay. Same way, posterior ethmoidal vein will be traversing into the posterior canal. But there is a catch that the nerve does not pass through it. Nerve generally terminates before it enters the posterior ethmoidal canal, and that's why the posterior ethmoidal canal is going to transmit, yes, the artery as well as vein, because vessels are being traversed here, but it does not give way to the ethmoidal nerve because it gets terminated before it enters the canal itself, right? So I'll just give you an idea of very good figure here. So if you see, this is very beautiful figure, and we can try to understand that this is the medial aspect, this hole is the medial aspect of the orbit, and this is going to be your ethmoidal bone. And in the ethmoidal bone you will be having two foramina, one is going to be anterior and another is going to be the posterior one, and these will be traversing the vessels, both artery plus vein, but not to the nerve, because nerve will be terminating earlier, and that's why the structure that is not going to be transmitted through the posterior ethmoidal canal is going to be none other than your option 2, posterior ethmoidal nerve.